I'm having my one!
Hey, welcome to the second of this new mini-series of short reviews and hobby updates from my Shelf of Shame Objectives of the Year, aka Shelf Control. If you're not sure what that's all about, jump back to podcast episode 95 from January, where we talk about our 2026 gaming objectives. But in one sentence, this is where each month of the year I take one game or thing from a gaming collection, offering something that has been unplayed, and make sure I get it done that month. Now, it's currently May, and I've quickly realised there is no way I'm going to get around to doing January and February, so apologies to anyone who's looking forward to that. In this edition of Shelf Control, we'll be looking at the huge American Civil War game, A Most Fearful Sacrifice, 3 Days of Gettysburg, a hex encounter historical war game from Flying Pig Games, a truly epic scale game based on the dramatic Battle of Gettysburg. Now, the Battle of Gettysburg in the American Civil War is one of those historic events that I think is almost a cliche of historical war gaming at this point. There are hundreds of games on this subject, but I think its popularity is sustained as it's seen as one of those what-if moments that are so big for a lot of fans of history, where the Confederate Army under Robert E. Lee had the opportunity to defeat a Union army at a site less than 80 miles from the northern capital at Washington, D.C. Now, whether this was actually the case, if there really was an opportunity for Lee to defeat General Meade, the Union commander, is for historians to debate. My own opinion is there probably wasn't really a good chance for them to win this one. For my part, my interest and probably my first awareness of this battle was via the 1993 film Gettysburg that brought an ensemble cast to an epic 4 hours retelling of the battle, complete with some very corny 1990s viewpoints of the justification of the war and a fairly problematic representation of black Americans during the conflict as muted victims. For all its problems when looking back on it from a 2026 perspective, when I first saw this, I was blown away by what the film did achieve in its epic representation of the battle in lines of troops and dramatic moments, which very much appealed to 10-year-old me. Anyway, before this becomes a history monologue, I'll bring it back to games. A Most Fearful Sacrifice is a game from 2022 designed by prolific war game designer Herman Luttman. It's the fourth Battle of Gettysburg game I've played, and I'll say straight away that this is by far the best. Also worth saying, this game is huge. There are 2 massive boards, which if used together would pretty much fill the entire surface of my gaming/dining room table. Fortunately, though, for most of the scenarios in the game, you're only using one of the game boards. So for my 2 games of this in April, I could fortunately fit this in the vault of my table. Important to say that I play this game solo, as I do with most of my historical games, and there was really no problem with this at all. The game works really well in solitaire. The gameplay here is driven through drawing of cards that activate your pieces according to their division or core formation. You'll draw cards from a combined deck of Union and Confederate events, plus those unit activations, plus random events that add some chaos. This kind of card activation is not entirely new, even being sort of how games using the Memoir 44 system work. But this game handles it so much better. When you draw a unit activation card, you will most of the time then roll 2 dice to determine how many of your formations you can activate. For example, if you roll high, you're going to be able to move and fight with more of your units than if you roll low. Now, it might sound a bit laborious, but it's actually super speedy and a frankly brilliant way of simulating the effectiveness of each of your commanders, which is achieved through each of your card activations having varied success criteria of what you need to roll to activate your troops based on the historical dynamism and whims of that unit's commander. This puts you in what are like real-world scenarios of being the army commander wishing that your subordinate general would just get on with it, but that general just not finding that flanking manoeuvre practicable. So that was a great feature, but it does really point towards what this game is all about. It is a simulation, it is not a sandbox. So if the sort of a player that get very frustrated by not being able to move your units completely as you want, this game may not be for you. Another enjoyable element of the card draw mechanism that drives the game forward is the events. When you draw an event card, some might have a play immediately rule on them, but others you can hold on to for when they're most useful for you. But on each card, you also have the option to use it to move or fire with a single unit. Most of the time, you're going to think, command a single unit, that's not going to be very impactful when normally I'm moving like a whole brigade, which is like 3 or 4 units, or even a whole division. But sometimes that is the better choice, as it might just push you forward in the game, or more importantly, my games, you can sometimes find you hold the event cards for use later and then find you've done that too much and you just can't use them. So you get in a great decision space of wanting to take enough event card to take advantage of the bigger benefits they give you, but you don't want to be stuck with loads of unused event cards at the end of your turn. A really great extra set of decisions to make as part of the main game. Obviously, it is a historical war game, so there is combat, which is probably the most complicated bit of the game, with quite a lot of rolling of dice, looking up the results on one or more tables. But like any mechanic, you get used to it. And I got the hang of it by the time I was into the second scenario, as it more or less is the same type of action repeated many times each turn. I don't have a lot to comment on here, as the process is a bit complicated, but actually what you're doing is quite simple, if that makes any sense. You work out who is doing the attacking, then what sort of attack, you firing weapons or assaulting, then work out the results. There's obviously a little bit more to it than that, but that's enough for the sake of this review. One small extra, which I quite like, is that the units aren't just shot up and done. They kind of have 4 hit points for the most part, where they are first tagged as shaken when they've taken a hit, and then after that the unit token is flipped to show they're battle worn, they've taken some casualties, or just lost their cohesion. Then a final shaken result can be taken on that battle worn side of it before they are eliminated. And as they go through each stage of this, their stats get reduced, so as your units fight, you do feel that they're gradually becoming degraded and their fighting abilities are impacted if you use them repeatedly. There are some ways to kind of bring them back if they can sort of rally, but I won't talk that through at this point. In terms of artwork and design, all games of this type do have a bit of a reputation of being a bit beige and dull, and I think the team behind A Most Fearful Sacrifice have done a really nice job of trying to address that. The tokens are nicely presented and the cards are fine, a bit functional I suppose, but they do the job perfectly okay. The game board is something I didn't really get on with though. I think the designer has tried to do something a bit different here, but importantly, with all these games, when movement and combat is impacted by the terrain your units are currently in, having a map that is unclear in any sense is just not great. A quick example of that in this game is in the Gettysburg town hexes. It's really unclear which hexes were classified as being town hexes and which weren't. It's just seemed to be down to the number of buildings that were on them. Who knows, maybe I missed something there. But when this impacts how far your units can move, it's really just not great, because you just get in a position where, okay, have I undercooked that or moved them too far? You just don't know. I guess this is maybe one of the reasons that a lot of these types of games go with player design. You just really need to have that really clear map. However, speaking for myself, I think this is a fairly insignificant point that shouldn't take away from how much I enjoyed this game, but it might put others off buying what was, for me, an extremely expensive game. So final thoughts, I really enjoyed A Most Fearful Sacrifice. I think Herman Luttman has done a fantastic job here, and that is, without doubt, not only the best Gettysburg board game I've ever played, it might be one of my favourite hex and counter war games I've ever played, right up there with games like Normandy 44 and Holland 44. Score-wise, this is a 9 out of 10 for me. I think it could even go higher if I ever have the chance to play the full battle scenario at some stage. You've got truly brilliant gameplay, only really let down by some of the map design. I would definitely be keeping this game, and look forward to another session at some point in the future. I think answering whether this game is for you, I'd really have to say to not make this your first hex and counter war game, as if for nothing else, it is intimidating how much is in the box here. It's a hefty, weighty box. But if you've done a bit of simpler hex and counter stuff or some other lighter war games, this could be a good step up for you. So that completes this review of A Most Fearful Sacrifice, 3 Days at Gettysburg. What a very long title that is. From Flying Pig Games on this second episode of Shelf Control. So until the next one, I wish you happy gaming and good luck in tackling your own stack of unplayed games.
I'm having my one!